Most people who start lifting are handed a choice that turns out to be false. They're told they can build muscle or they can stay lean, and that wanting both at once is a beginner's mistake they'll grow out of. So they pick a side. Some eat as much as they can and tell themselves the fat is temporary, something they'll deal with later. Others hold their calories down and spend months confused about why the mirror keeps showing them the same person. Both groups are working from the same misunderstanding. Adding muscle without gaining much fat is not a lucky outcome reserved for a few people with the right parents. It's a process with known inputs. When the inputs are set correctly, the output is close to predictable. That word carries more weight than it seems to. Predictable. The body isn't deciding each week whether your effort has earned a reward. It's responding to signals. It reads some of them carefully and ignores others completely. And once you know which is which, learning how to lean bulk stops feeling like a gamble and starts looking like something closer to configuration. You set the conditions. The machine does what machines do. The signal that matters most is mechanical tension. When a muscle is forced to produce high force against a resistance it isn't used to, it registers that as information, a demand it currently cannot meet without consequence. The response to that demand is repair and reinforcement. Over days, the fibers rebuild slightly stronger and slightly larger than before. This is the entire engine of growth, and it runs on one condition being met again and again. The demand has to keep climbing. A weight that challenged you in March and still challenges you the same amount in June is no longer a signal. It's a routine. The muscle has already adapted to it and has no reason to change further. This is why progressive overload isn't one technique among many. It's the thing the rest of the process exists to support. Adding a small amount of weight to the bar over time, or another repetition, or another set held to the same standard of effort, that steady, unglamorous climb is the signal being renewed. Everything else you do, all the food and the sleep and the supplements, is in service of your ability to keep answering that climb. Take the signal away, and no amount of eating will build muscle. It will only build fat, because the body has nowhere productive to put the surplus. If mapping that progression correctly is the part you suspect you'd get wrong on your own, that's the exact thing the Bulk Forge program was built to take off your plate. The full week-by-week plan is linked in the description below. And that brings us to the part almost everyone gets wrong, which is the food. The phrase caloric surplus explained sounds like it should take an afternoon, and the mechanism does. To build new tissue, the body needs slightly more energy coming in than it's spending. New muscle has to be constructed out of something, and that something is the excess. Simple enough. The problem is not the concept. The problem is the size of the number people attach to it. A muscle can only be built so quickly. For a man past the beginner phase, the realistic ceiling is somewhere in the range of 2 pounds of actual muscle in a month, and often less. A woman's ceiling is lower still. That rate sets a hard limit on how much extra energy the body can actually use. Anything you eat beyond what's required to fuel that small, steady construction has nowhere to go except storage. So when someone decides to bulk and starts eating 500, 700, 1,000 calories over maintenance, they're not accelerating muscle growth. Muscle growth is already running at its own fixed pace, indifferent to the flood. The extra is fat, and it arrives quickly, and it's the reason the word bulking has such an ugly reputation. The surplus that actually serves a lean bulk is small. For most people, it lands somewhere around 200 calories above maintenance, enough to cover the cost of construction with a little margin, not enough to spill over into meaningful fat gain. It feels almost too modest to matter. People distrust it because it doesn't feel like doing something. But the restraint is the whole point. A dirty bulk feels productive because the scale moves fast, and the scale moving fast is precisely the sign that most of what you're adding is not muscle. There's a specific starting point where all of this becomes especially sharp, and it's worth naming because so many people are standing in it without a word for it. The skinny fat transformation is the one most lifters underestimate. Skinny fat is the state of being neither lean nor large, a low amount of muscle underneath a soft layer of fat, often on a frame that looks unremarkable in clothes and worse out of them. The instinct is to attack it from one of two directions. Cut hard to reveal what's underneath, and discover there's almost nothing underneath, just a smaller version of the same softness, or bulk aggressively to add size, and watch the soft layer thicken until any muscle gained is buried deeper than before. The way out is neither. Someone who is skinny fat usually doesn't need to lose much weight and doesn't need to gain much either. They need to change the composition of what's already there, hold roughly level on the scale, or drift up very slowly, train hard enough to renew the growth signal week after week, and let the slow arithmetic do its work. Muscle replaces fat gradually. It takes patience that the cut it fast, bulk it fast culture actively discourages, which is why so few people manage it, and why the ones who do look, months later, like they belong to a different genetic category. They don't. They just ran the correct process instead of a fast one. If you're standing in that exact spot right now, you don't have to work the way out by trial and error. The step-by-step lean bulking program linked below hands you the numbers, the training, and the timeline, so you're following a map instead of guessing. I want to sit on the training for a moment longer, because the food conversation tends to swallow everything, and it shouldn't. You can execute the surplus perfectly and gain nothing worth having if the signal isn't there. The training doesn't need to be complicated. It needs to be hard in a specific and measurable way, and it needs to get slightly harder over time. Enough volume that the muscle is genuinely challenged across a week. For most people, that means somewhere between 10 and 20 hard sets per muscle group, spread out rather than crammed into one brutal session. Effort that lands close to failure, often enough that the body has a reason to respond, and a record. This is the piece people skip. If you're not tracking what you lifted last time, you have no way of knowing whether today was actually progress or just a repeat. The muscle knows the difference, even when you don't. Progressive overload only exists if it's measured. Cardio belongs in here too, quietly, because it's usually framed as the enemy of a bulk, and it isn't. A moderate amount of low-intensity work, the kind that keeps your heart rate elevated but never leaves you wrecked, supports recovery, and keeps your conditioning intact without eating meaningfully into the surplus. The mistake is treating cardio as a punishment for eating, then doing so much of it that you erase the small surplus you carefully built. Kept modest and deliberate, it does more good than harm. Now the supplements, which is where the most money is wasted and the least honesty is offered. Anyone searching for the best supplements for muscle growth is walking into an industry built almost entirely on the gap between what sounds effective and what has actually been shown to work. The honest list is short and boring. Creatine monohydrate does what it claims, a small, reliable improvement in strength and in the muscle's capacity for work, backed by more research than almost any other legal compound in the space. Protein powder is not magic, but it's a convenient way to hit a daily protein target that would otherwise take more cooking than most people will sustain. Caffeine improves training performance for most people who aren't already saturated with it. That's most of the meaningful list. Everything past it, the proprietary blends, the pills promising to partition your nutrients or spike your natural hormones, occupies a spectrum that runs from unproven to actively insulting to your intelligence. A supplement is a small edge applied on top of a process that's already working. It's never the process itself, and no amount of packaging changes that. Here's the part that's harder to sell because it asks for time. A real lean bulk is slow. Gaining 2 pounds of muscle in a good month means that over a year of disciplined work, a natural lifter past the beginner stage might add somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds of muscle to their frame, and that's a strong year. It doesn't photograph as a transformation between 2 Tuesdays. It photographs as a transformation between 2 years. The people who succeed at this are, more than anything else, the people who didn't quit during the stretch where nothing visible was happening, but the numbers on the bar were quietly climbing. The visible change is always lagging behind the real one. By the time you can see it, it's been true for a while. There's a maintenance rhythm to it as well. Even a well-run lean bulk will, over enough months, accumulate a little more fat than you want, because no surplus is perfect and estimation drifts. So the process isn't a single unbroken climb. It's a long, gentle bulk, followed by a short, controlled period of eating at a slight deficit to shed the small amount of fat that crept in, then back to building. Done right, each cycle leaves you a little more muscular and about as lean as you started, and the baseline creeps upward year over year. That cadence, build slowly, trim briefly, build again, is what separates a physique that improves for a decade from one that balloons and crashes on an annual loop. Everything I've laid out here is the framework. The complete Bulk Forge program in the description turns it into the exact surplus, the exact workouts, and the meals to run them, built so you can start it this week instead of spending another year assembling the pieces yourself. None of this is hidden knowledge. That's the strange thing about it. Every piece of what makes a lean bulk work has been sitting in plain view the whole time, unglamorous and freely available, losing constantly to advice that promises to be faster. The reason it looks rare is not that the method is secret, it's that the method is patient, and patience is the one input the industry can't sell you, and most people won't supply on their own. The machine was always predictable. The question was never whether the body would respond to the right signals. It was whether the person running it could stay interested long enough to let it.